It's time to put your health in your own hands. Get ready to learn from today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Karen Burns Allen. Karen's passion for health has guided her work for more than 20 years as an integrative clinician, educator, author, and most recently as a Biofield researcher. She is a nationally awarded thought leader in integrative health. Her most recent publication, published in March 2018, is included in Integrative Sexual Health, the latest volume in Dr. Andrew Weil's Integrative Library series by Oxford University Press. She is a former faculty of Bastyr University, a leading naturopathic school in the Seattle area. Karen is now on faculty at the Phoenix Institute of Herbal Medicine and Acupuncture. She presents at national and international conferences on clinical therapeutics, research, and emerging healthcare disciplines with audiences in the United States, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. She is a former director of education for an NGO developing sustainable local chronic healthcare options for communities in Haiti. In 2013, Karen's work led her to explore the remarkable life force energy work known as the Trivedi effect. With Mahendra Trivedi, Karen refined a natural gift through which life force energy is engaged with quantifiable, real-world outcomes. As a biofield researcher, Karen has verified this capacity in rigorous studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Karen serves on the Biofield and Integrative Pain Committees for the Integrative Health Policy Consortium, an advisory body that engages policy dialogue with congressional representatives and other governmental bodies, including NIH, FDA, and the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Tammy. It's great to be here.
This is a really exciting time we live in because obviously healthcare is changing rapidly, or the way that we see healthcare. So can you tell me more about integrative health and what exactly integrative health is?
That's a great question. We live in a society where our view of our bodies very often is kind of like they're machines, as if somebody was a car and if their carburetor breaks, we just take it out and put in a new one. And this is the version of health that we've inherited from our parents, from their parents. But healthcare around the world is not actually like that. In most countries and in all traditional systems of healthcare, historically, any kind of medicine has been about the whole system, like a plant that has a leaf that's connected to a stem and a root, or a puppy that has a floppy ear that's connected to a wagging tail, or maybe a person who has acid reflux in their stomach and severe back pain that's related to their anxiety and their insomnia. So when we talk about integrative healthcare, we're talking about something that actually interacts with the whole person and sees everything as connected to everything else within that person, not looking at, say, someone's acid indigestion as one item that's unrelated to their back pain or their insomnia or their anxiety or the fact that they're working at a job that's incredibly stressful and they hate. So living systems are quite complex, and they're very different than machines. And when we're talking about integrative healthcare, we're talking about building health within a living system.
Wow, because humans obviously are a living system. So traditional or conventional medicine really then is treating a symptom as opposed to treating the whole. Is that accurate, or how would you describe the difference between integrative medicine and conventional medicine?
Yeah, I think you are accurate in what you've said there. I think the easiest way for people to think of it is that conventional medicine, and we think of it as modern medicine. The World Health Organization describes it as modern medicine, which basically means drugs and surgery. It's practiced in the US today actually as a disease management system, and it's focused on repairing disease systems. And it's great for things like an emergency room visit. When somebody's been in a bad car accident or they've broken their leg and their bones need to be knit back together. And there are these heroic life-saving measures that conventional medicine is very, very good at, because these are beyond the capacity of a body to repair on its own with nurturing and help from integrative therapeutics. But in long-term conventional medicine, the drugs and surgical and physical therapy options that are there to ease the burden of symptoms are often like Band-Aids. I mean, thank goodness we have some of those things, because pain is not great and we want to do something about it. But within conventional medicine, we are managing the disease instead of actually getting into the root causes of it and helping the body resolve it. Now, in an ideal world, we'd have both conventional medicine options and integrative options that are part of the health care landscape, because the average person has both acute and chronic illnesses and the occasional emergency. And what we know from research is that health issues can be resolved with less cost, with fewer side effects, with higher patient satisfaction using integrative healthcare. This is called, you'll hear it phrased within the healthcare dialogue as the triple aim. We want people to be healthy, we want it to cost less, and we want them to have higher satisfaction.
The triple aim. So tell me a little more about how you got involved in integrative healthcare.
That's a funny, winding story. I'm actually the daughter of 5 generations of MDs. And so I grew up around a dinner table where people talked about medicine and drugs and surgery, and there was not a lot of openness actually to integrative therapeutics. Things like chiropractic or naturopathic medicine was viewed as complete sham. And so it was a difficult challenge for me personally when I had a child who had a difficulty that was not solved within modern medicine. And she got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I became more and more and more desperate. And for those of you who are listening who have a child with a serious illness, I'm sure you can relate. There is a kind of desperation that happens in looking for a solution that goes perhaps beyond what you might be willing to endure for yourself. But when you're there as an advocate, as a champion for your sick child, it encourages you perhaps to go a little bit farther. When we got to the point where the pediatrician said, "We'd like to do this experimental procedure," Tammy, I somehow hit a wall. At that point, I couldn't take the step to do something experimental on my child who was very vulnerable. And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't go there." And the pediatrician, who was a good man and he was a good doc, he looked over the top of his glasses at me. He gave me the good doctor glare, which, growing up in 5 generations of MDs, I was very familiar with. And he said, just what other options do you think you have, really? And I thought to myself, I will find one. I will not experiment on my child, and I will not see her go down the tubes. And so I walked out of the office in a fit of umbrage, thinking, okay. And then I didn't know where to go next. And I called all of my friends who were mamas saying, my daughter is really sick. I've just fired my pediatrician. I'm absolutely desperate. What do I do? And someone brought over a book for me, a friend who, while I was standing at the door holding my screaming 1-year-old. And she handed me this book on integrative medicine and said, this is what I use. And I didn't read any of the chapters that explained how it worked or what was going on. I flipped to a chapter about the issues that she was having, and there were specific suggestions. And I went to the health food store and I bought some things and I came home. And one of these things in particular was a homeopathic called lycopodium. And I gave her a dose of it and she went to sleep and slept for 12 hours, which she had never done in her life. And when she woke up again, she was crying and fussing and the same symptoms. I gave her another dose. I fed her. She went back to sleep for another 12 hours. And Tammy, when she woke up, after that, the light was back in her eyes. And she was alive again in a way that she had not been since very early on. And after that, all of her symptoms just gently faded away. And she got stronger and healthier, and all of the developmental delays that we'd been working with gently disappeared. And I began to work with an integrative doc and with a naturopath. And it so impressed me with the body's capacity to repair that I was genuinely in awe. I had gone through college studying computer science and mechanical engineering. And so I was, and my first job out of college was for the Solar Energy Research Institute, supporting scientists. So the idea that I would ever step into healthcare was certainly not anything on my vista. But I was so in awe of this experience. It was so impactful for me that I ended up going back and retraining, going to school for 3 years and studying integrative medicine and then doing additional therapeutic training for a decade. And now it's 24 years later that I've been practicing, and it feels like an amazing privilege to sit across from people day after day after day who are doing their best to deal with whatever difficulty they've got and striving to heal, and working with them to find therapeutics that achieve that triple order that we talked about.
Wow, what a phenomenal story. So you actually have a really busy practice in San Francisco and online as a telehealth practice. That's very interesting and innovative in itself. Why do you find that people are seeking to consult with an integrative practitioner?
In the society that we have, a lot of times people think of conventional medicine, modern medicine, as the only medicine. It's what their insurance covers. It's what their doc that they grew up with knows how to do. And so for the folks whose problems get solved in that world, they don't come to see me. But there are a couple of groups that definitely do come to see me. Everyone comes because they have a problem that they want solved. Now, sometimes it's increasing capacity. For example, I do a lot of work in endocrine repair and fertility, helping people get pregnant, stay pregnant, have a healthy baby. Or sometimes it's for improved mental function. Someone says, I'm in graduate school and I just know I'm not my best. And I just can't think as clearly as I used to. I'm not able to garner all my resources in the same way. And I went into my doc, and my doc said, yeah, you're fine. But I know I'm not fine. I know I'm not who I was, who I could be. And yet there's no test that's measurable that will show what's wrong with me. So there are times when it's to increase capacity, but most often people come in the category of what I call fix what's broke. They have something that's wrong, like I did with my little girl, and usually they're desperate. Very often these are people who have been through the system. As an example, somebody with chronic pelvic pain who, the pelvis is complex and it has GI stuff, gastrointestinal stuff, and reproductive stuff, all the woman's reproductive organs, and also your lower back and circulatory stuff. And so it can be very difficult to figure out what exactly really is the problem. And a lot of those women have gone through, a GI workup and a reproductive workup and a musculoskeletal workup, and they still don't have a clear diagnosis. And then their doc refers them for a psychiatric eval for depression and psychiatric medications, which is devastating. And when they are not able to find a solution within conventional care, that's when they're open to looking outside the box into an innovation, into a different style of therapeutic, something that actually builds health. And those are the group of people who come to see me.
So when you talk about people who are ready for the innovations, or they're an early adopter innovator, what exactly does that mean?
These are people who like to try new things. A lot of times they're people who are comfortable with risk. They appreciate outside the box thinking. They seek it out. They do it themselves in their lives. And they want to work with other people who are also innovators. They like to be first. They like to try new things. These are the people who stood in line for hours and hours outside the Apple store, to buy the iPhone or their Apple Watch. And a lot of times these are people who are looking for new solutions for better solutions. So an innovation is viewed as a better way of doing something, solving a problem in a more elegant or a more sophisticated way. And some people are drawn to that. They're looking for that. A lot of times these are people with more resources. They tend to create trends. These are certainly the people who are very ready to pay out of pocket for something that they see as a superior form of healthcare, something that is achieving the triple aim with less cost to them in terms of side effects of drugs, with better outcomes. These are folks who want the innovation of integrative healthcare options that do achieve this triple aim.
That's really interesting. In your bio, I remember I read about the fact that you've been a pioneer in biofield research. That's new words. I noticed in the last, 10 years, there's all these new words that I had never heard of before. But biofield research is something that you're doing. So is this an innovation, biofield research? And can you tell me more about what a biofield is and how that works?
Absolutely. And I think, Tammy, you're not alone, with this. What exactly does that word really mean? I'm not even sure exactly what you're telling me when you say the word biofield. And so it's thanks for that question and the opportunity to introduce this concept, because it's very new. The term biofield itself was proposed in 1992 by a committee that was pulled together of complementary and alternative medicine practitioners and researchers at the Office of Alternative Medicine that was part of the National Institutes of Health. And the committee was one of several that were meeting as a group in Virginia to look at what is happening with these forms of medicine that don't involve drugs and surgery, things that we think of as structural medicine like chiropractic or acupuncture that's physically touching something, and also the things where nobody touches anything, things that are known in Chinese medicine as Qigong, which people may have heard of, or Reiki, or therapeutic touch. And so in 1992, this group tried to come up with some way to describe what happens in an energetic way with a person who is interacted with in some way. And they came up with this term, biofield, which also implied that there were biofield therapies. And the idea is that the person, like we talked about before, is a complex life form. And they have an energetic pattern, which we can measure in physics. And that energetic pattern interacts with other things around it. Now, other emerging science fields that show us what's happening here are psychoneuroimmunology, where we interact with the world and the ecosystem of the world with our immune system. So that's an example of a way that we see how biofield acts. So in the beginning, when this term was first coined, one of the big uphill challenges was just the idea that this sort of you couldn't touch it, you couldn't measure it, you couldn't see it in the way that you could see somebody's arm or the values in somebody's blood labs. So there was a whole field of research that came out of that 1992 era, and now we're a few decades on from that, and we actually have excellent research now showing in what way does this biofield, which is a managing quality of each person's life and body, how does it interact with the world? And more importantly, how does it interact as a therapeutic? So an example of a form of biofield is called DHI, Distant Healing Intention Therapies. And this is something that I've been involved with in my research. And I was introduced to the science of this over a few decades of my integrative work. And I sought out Mahendra Trivedi, who is a leader in this field. And through my work with him since 2013, I began to develop my own capacity, which is always a gift, to engage this biofield life force energy and direct it on behalf of somebody or something as a therapeutic. And this brings up the question in the average listener's mind, are you talking actually about thinking something and then something in a test tube changes? Yes. Are you talking about thinking or intending or praying or invoking energy in some way and then something in a person's life or in their body changes? Yes. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And there's sort of this, oh my goodness, that is impossible and it's too good to be true factor in the average listener. And I too went through that. But I'm here to say there is a huge body of research, thousands and thousands and thousands of research studies showing the efficacy of this. And so there's a couple of questions that come up. One of them is somebody actually able to invoke this energy? And the second one is, can we measure its outcome? So I'd like to share, if I can, Tammy, my first experience of this with Mr. Trivedi. There was a distant healing therapeutic, a Biofield treatment that Mr. Trivedi did while he was in a different state and I was in my home. And this was being done with a group in an audience. And for a long time, I had had chronic back pain. And he has everyone lay down. I laid down, and he invokes this energy on your behalf. And I felt myself relaxing all over. And then I fell asleep. And I had a really deep night's sleep. This was happening in the evening. And when I woke up the next morning and I carefully went to sit up, as is my usual thing, because I had had chronic back problems, I noticed immediately something is different here. And I sat up and I turned and I bent over and I touched my toes and I stood up and my back pain was completely gone. And that's been 5 years and it hasn't come back. So that was my first introduction to the actual reality of what distant healing is able to do.
Wow, that's really phenomenal. Because when you think about that, I want to backtrack a little bit about that. But when you're talking about the Trivedi effect and your personal experience and the life force energy and biofield, can you explain or paint the picture of what life force energy is? What is actually happening with the energy, and what type of energy is this life force energy?
Sure, that's a great question. And these terms get thrown around. So let's just clarify.
Thank
Life,
you.
life force energy is something you can think of like fuel, and I'll be glad to describe that more. The biofield is the alive part inside you that can engage with this fuel for some useful purpose. And the Trivedi effect is one specific way that biofield therapeutic is done. And it's a very deep, very effective way. Other ones that people might have heard of are Qigong and Reiki and healing touch or therapeutic touch.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those are ways that we engage life force. And again, we can think of life force as fuel. So people might have heard the word prana. Prana is a Sanskrit word that has two pieces. The first piece, pra, means to exist before, and the second part, ana, means an atom, a tiny bit. So prana means that which exists before an atom. And the idea is that it is what exists in the non-material domain before it gets into physical form. Now, people might have also heard this call chi. And chi is this non-physical life force energy that flows through the body. And this is what's used when people do acupressure or acupuncture, where an acupuncture needle is used to help the movement of qi, either to bring it into an area or to disperse it out of an area where it's stagnant. And all of these are different terms for the same thing that we feel universally, which is energy. And people know how they feel when they're full of energy as opposed to when they're totally depleted. So that would be an example of how you're aware of your own life force energy. Now, there are some people who uh, frame this idea of life force energy in a spiritual or a religious way. And it's not the same as the idea of someone's soul. I want people to think of it in the terms of fuel. And it's often framed in a spiritual way that life, our life, is always a divine gift. It's also framed in a physics way that energy exists in the cosmos and it can never be added to or destroyed, it just exists. And so our life force energy is what is there that keeps our organism all functioning as best it can in the challenges of daily life. And it is open to being interacted with by a biofield stimulus, a therapeutic, like the Trivedi effect. Does that help all of those different terms come together for you, Tammy?
Yeah, I think that it's useful to just give people a lot of different possibilities so that they can discern for themselves what life force energy is. Because, like you said, many people liken it to the connection to the divine or the God of your understanding or to the universal energy that exists, whatever that is in someone's own personal definition. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the research and how that has helped to measure life force energy, because you've been involved in some of that biofield research. And then how does the use of the life force energy really work in terms of, like you said, you woke up and with no back pain after having chronic back pain. So obviously this would be an alternative to pain pills, to taking medicine in that sense of the word. So can you talk a little bit more about that with life force energy and health?
Absolutely. Um, we are learning more and more through our research about the way in which this energy works. And I'd like to, in the mix of our interesting words today, I'd like to introduce one more, which is salutogenesis. Saluto is health, and genesis is the creation of. This life force energy, the Trivedi effect, that is pouring fuel into the biofield of a person, is fundamentally salutogenic. And I don't want to get too geeky here for our listeners, but this term describes so beautifully what happens. If you think about a car that's trying to drive from point A to point B, if there's no gas in the tank, if there's no oil in the engine, if there's no water in the radiator, it's going to have a really hard time achieving its goal of getting from point A to point B. And this salutogenic energy interacts with the biofield of the person and it fills up their tank. It generates health. It engages all of their body's own self-regulatory mechanisms. Like for me, I had chronic back pain that was related to an early injury to tendons and ligaments. And what we understand from integrative healthcare is that when you support the body appropriately, it is able to do repair of its own systems. So in a central nervous system or in a musculoskeletal system, your body, given appropriate tools, is very often able to repair. So when this Trivedi effect therapeutic engagement for me happened, the life force energy that came pouring in to me through Mr. Trivedi's work, was able to support my body in self-repair in that salutogenic way. Now, one of the other nice things about this energy, you may hear people in a discussion of the Trivedi effect talk about the way in which there is an intelligent energy. And this is because, like all of the integrative therapeutics, we don't get to direct the way that we do in conventional medicine, where we say, this molecule we're going to change in this way. With life force energy, there is a salutogenic factor where it is actually supporting the body in whatever way the body needs, which we don't need to know in advance. In order for my back to heal, I didn't need to know, is this primarily related to ligaments or tendons, or is it actually the nerves in the pelvis, or what is it? The life force energy itself goes to what is needed.
Wow, it's really this is a really interesting conversation because obviously you're coming from this 20 some years of actually working with people in the integrative medicine and applying life force energy and all of this into healthcare. And then of course you have your personal experience with with how it actually worked and helped you. So that's really phenomenal. If somebody wants to contact you to get more information or work with you, how can they do that?
My website is KarenAllenCatalyst.com. And there's contact information there, and I'd be glad to have them reach out to me.
Okay, great. So Karen Catalyst, did I say that right?
Yeah, Karen Allen Catalyst. And do you have show notes for your?
Yes, we'll have.
We'll be sure and put a link in there.
And we'll have show notes and links and everything. And I'd also like to invite you back again so that we can continue and go a little bit deeper into the conversation another time. So I'll just put that out there right now.
Yeah, thank you. I would love that, Tammy. We didn't really talk about the details about research, but there really is fascinating stuff. And I think it's encouraging for people who are maybe desperate or in pain to know there might be an option out there for me.
Yes. So let's plan on our next conversation focusing more on the different research and so that people have something to look forward to.
That'd be great.
Next conversation, we can focus on more on the research and a lot of the cutting edge innovations that are happening. And again, everyone, you can always contact Karen Burns Allen at KarenAllenCatalyst.com. Just look at the show notes and click on that to go check it out. Well, Karen, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say thank you, Tammy. I appreciate all that you are doing here in Optimal Health Show by connecting people with information, with options. Your show has its own Biofield. And right now it's rippling out to all these people who are looking for all the things that you bring them.
Wow, thank you. That's really phenomenal. And that is interesting to think about it in that way, that everything we do does have a ripple effect. And my goal in life is always to be a magnet for all things good, but also to put out all things good. So thank you for now I have a concept in my mind about what that really means in an operational sense in the world, about how that concept really works. So everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. To get more solid health and wellness information, visit OptimalHealthRadio.com.